it just me? Or is it getting crazier out there?
Welcome to the Late Late Horror Show, and is this the same ensemble I wore for the Addams Family video? I think it is. Anyway, tonight we're returning to the beautiful, terrifying, emotionally devastating world of Mike Flanagan with the Netflix 2020 series, The Haunting of Bly Manor. Now, this show has been on my mind quite a lot lately, especially the last few weeks, the reasons for which I will delve into later on. Now, if I were to talk about the show in its entirety, this would be another multi-part video. And I think discussing it as a whole would be better in a broader conversation between Dino and I, possibly sometime down the line. But for the purposes of tonight's video, I'm going to focus on a few very specific elements of the show. But first, some background and a massive, massive spoiler warning. Now, true to form, there are many familiar faces in Bly Manor from Flanagan's prior projects. We've got Victoria Pedretti, who played Nell Crane in The Haunting of Hill House. Amazing as ever, she's here as Danny Clayton, a young American woman hired as an au pair for the children of the wealthy Wingrave family in England. Danny moves to England to escape her traumatic past and quickly becomes subject to the paranormal happenings of Bly Manor. Oliver Jackson Cohen, who played Luke Crane in Haunting of Hill House, is here as Peter Quint, who was the former executive assistant to Henry Wingrave, who frequently visited Bly Manor prior to Danny's arrival. Peter Quint is not a good guy. However, Oliver Jackson Cohen's performance is at once charming, menacing, and pitiable. And he takes a character that could be a very one-note kind of villain and elevates it and deepens it with nuance and a sense of deep-set sadness. He's just incredible to watch, and he pulls off an impeccable Scottish accent. Like, I actually had to check to see if he was actually Scottish. He is not. We've got Henry Thomas back. Henry Thomas, who played the younger version of Hugh Crane in Hill House and also had been in other former Flanagan works. He is Henry Wingrave, Miles and Flora's estranged uncle, who hires Danny to be the au pair at Bly Manor. Henry Thomas's faux British accent is not quite the greatest, but it's serviceable, and I don't think it detracts from his performance. Henry Thomas, you can see his soul and like every emotion pouring out of his eyes. It's truly remarkable to see. Carla Gugino is back, who played Olivia Crane in Haunting of Hill House. She was Jessie in Gerald's Game. She's wonderful as always. She's a smaller role in Bly Manor. She's featured as, we'll just say, the storyteller for now, who recounts the events of the series to the guests of the wedding in Northern California in 2007. Katie Siegel is back, who played Theo in Hill House, and she was in Hush in many of Mike Flanagan's projects. Also, Mike Flanagan's wife. Lucky, lucky man, Mike Flanagan. She plays Viola in Bly Manor, who was the heiress and original owner of the Bly estate centuries before the story proper begins. Also returning is Katie Parker, who played Poppy Hill, one of the residents of Hill House and one of the main ghosts, and she plays Perdita, the younger sister to Viola. And Bly Manor introduces some new blood to the Flanagan House of Horrors, several of whom have continued to work on other Flanagan projects. These new faces include Amelia Eve as Jamie, Bly Manor's dry-witted gardener and love interest to Danny, and incredible Tania Miller as Hannah Gross, who is the housekeeper of Bly Manor and fiercely protective of the grounds and the staff and the Wingrave children. Fans of Doctor Who may recognize her from an episode in the Peter Capaldi era, and she, along with another actor I have yet to mention, is one of the two hearts of this show, a true Gallifreyan. Alex Esso as Charlotte Wingrave, the mother of Flora and Miles, and who is deceased prior to the events of the story. A year prior to being in Bly Manor, played Wendy Torrance in Doctor Sleep, also directed by Mike Flanagan. And she was also one of a very important character in Midnight Mass and was featured in The Midnight Club, all Mike Flanagan works. And then we have the two children of this show. Amelia Bea Smith as Flora Wingrave, the younger of the late Dominic and Charlotte Wingrave's children. She's also the voice of Peppa Pig, so that's fun. And Benjamin Evan Ainsworth as Miles Wingrave, the troubled older Wingrave child. He played a featured role in season 1 of the Sandman series on Netflix, which is one of my favorite things of all time. And he also was the voice of Pinocchio in the Disney live action version of the classic animated film that came out last year. I did not watch that one. No offense to the incredibly talented young actor Benjamin Evan Ainsworth. Also, Greg Sestero plays a featured role in Bly Manor. If you're familiar with the seminal work of art that is The Room, you may recognize Greg Sestero as, oh, hi, Mark. And then we have Rahul Kohli as Owen, Bly Manor's cook. We'll circle around back to him. Now, like Flanagan's Haunting of Hill House, The Haunting of Bly Manor is a loose adaptation of a literary work, this time being the 1898 novella The Turn of the Screw by Henry James. The series also includes elements from other works by James, including the short stories The Jolly Corner, The Way It Went, The Two Faces, The Romance of Certain Old Clothes, and The Beast in the Jungle, among several others. Now, while many narrative and creative changes are made, the overall story and characters are quite a bit closer to the source material than they were in Hill House. Bly Manor updates the story from the late 1800s to 1987 and also 2007. Similar to the novella, the story is told as a ghost story told from a narrator to an audience, while in the novella it's told on Christmas Eve. In the show, it's changed to after a wedding rehearsal in 2007. The story proper tells of a young American teacher, Danny Clayton, who is living in England in 1987. She's hired by the wealthy, alcoholic, depressed Henry Wingrave as an au pair to his niece and nephew at the family country estate. And after which they fall under his care. Arriving with Owen the cook, Danny meets Hannah Gross the housekeeper and Jamie the gardener. Also, Miles and Flora, the children who she will be taking care of. Now, in addition to seeing a specter of her own, usually in reflections and mirrors, Danny begins to notice strange occurrences all around the premises, including muddy footprints leading from the lake up to the house, mysterious figures on the grounds, strange behavior from the children, particularly Miles, and just a general pall over the house, stemming from the deaths of Miles and Flora's parents, as well as the apparent suicide of their former governess, Rebecca Jessel, as well as the mysterious disappearance of Peter Quint, Henry's former assistant. Now, summarizing the entire show would be a video all its own. So, I do need to kind of break down some of the plot points necessary to give context to today's discussions. Again, huge spoiler warnings, so viewer beware. If you don't want any spoilers, pause this now, watch Haunting of Bly Manor, and come back. Moving on. And this is like weirdly taking kind of from the middle/end of the story, but here we go. So, centuries before the beginning of the actual story, the original owner of Bly Manor died, orphaning his two grown daughters, Viola and Perdita. Viola, to Perdita's chagrin, marries a distant cousin, Arthur Lloyd, and Perdita has formed feelings towards him, but goes along with it because it is what's best for the family and for the manor. After giving birth to a daughter, Isabel, Viola falls ill to a mysterious lung disease. She refuses her last rites, insisting that she will not go. So she doesn't die, but ends up just living in this sickly state for years and years, where she is isolated from the family and frequently walks the halls of the house searching for her daughter and longingly looking for her and watching her from afar. Perdita, after years of this, no longer able to tolerate her sister's worsening condition, smothers Viola to death and marries Arthur herself. Viola's spirit is trapped in a chest in the manor, filled with dresses and jewelry that she has bequeathed to her daughter Isabel. Arthur's finances eventually begin to dwindle, and at risk of losing the house, Perdita opens the chest and hoping to sell Isabel's inheritance to save the manor. And then Viola's spirit comes out and kills Perdita. Upon finding Perdita's corpse, Arthur fears that the chest is cursed, so he tosses it into the lake on the property and leaves with Isabel. Viola becomes the lady in the lake, searching the manor for her daughter at night and killing anyone who happens to stray in her path. Her memory and her sense of self and her face fade throughout the years, and the spirits of anyone who dies on the grounds are trapped with her. They are caught in the gravity of the lady in the lake, and as her face fades, her memories fade. Any poor spirit who is caught there is doomed to suffer the same fate. Now, Peter Quint, Henry's former assistant, not good guy. He had been in a relationship with Rebecca Jessel, who was the governess to Miles and Flora. And he was planning on stealing a chunk of the Wingrave fortune and running off to America with Rebecca. However, he gets in the path of the lady in the lake during one of her nighttime walks and is killed. Peter learns that he's able to possess the living temporarily, but can do so permanently if he is invited. As a ghost, Peter convinces Rebecca that they can be together forever if she invites him to possess her. And she does so, but Peter, in her body, walks her into the lake, drowning her, rendering her a ghost in the process. And Rebecca's horrified and betrayed, but Peter convinces her that using the same method, they can permanently possess Miles and Flora, letting them to start new lives together. Peter and Rebecca have been intermittently using Miles and Flora as their vessels, and it turns out that Peter Quint, in Miles's body, shoved the housekeeper Hannah down a well and killing her just before Danny's arrival. Hannah has unwittingly been a ghost the entire time, functioning in normal day-to-day life because of her refusal to remember or admit her own death, as well as her desire to stay close to Owen, the cook. The housekeeper and cook are hopelessly in love, but neither had yet taken the chance to admit it to one another. Ugh. So things come to a head when Peter enacts his plan to permanently possess the children. He successfully possesses Miles, but Rebecca lets Flora go, imploring Danny to run away and save her. Danny, however, gets caught by the lady in the lake. Before the lady in the lake is able to kill Danny, however, Flora intercepts her. Viola, lady in the lake, seeing Flora and being reminded of her daughter Isabel, takes Flora and goes to drown her in the lake. Danny saves Flora and Miles by inviting Viola's spirit to permanently inhabit her body, releasing all of the souls that had been previously trapped on the grounds over the centuries. And Miles is free from Peter Quint. Henry returns to raise Flora and Miles as his own. And Danny and Jamie, the gardener, who have fallen in love, move to America to start their life together. Hannah's body is found in the well and is recovered by Danny and Owen. Owen leaves and opens a restaurant in France. And eventually, Danny starts to see Viola's reflection rather than her own. And she realizes that she is gradually being overtaken by the lady in the lake and may come to harm Jamie. During their visit to Owen's restaurant in Paris, he reveals that Flora and Miles don't recall the events of Bly Manor and only remember the happy memories. Eventually, Danny wakes up one night to her hands around Jamie's throat. Not wanting to risk Jamie's life, Danny returns to Bly Manor and drowns herself in the lake, taking Viola's place as the lady in the lake, but existing as a peaceful entity rather than a vengeful one. Now, the storyteller, the narrator, who had been played by Carla Gugino, is revealed to be a middle-aged Jamie, retelling the story with some names and location changed for the about-to-be wedded couple, who is Flora and her fiance, Greg Sestero. So she goes to enjoy the wedding of the now grown Flora with a much older Henry, a grown Miles, an older Owen. And back in her hotel room, Jamie waits by the door, hoping to reunite with Danny's ghost. Danny's ghost watches over her with a hand on her shoulder. Ugh, this show. Now, before I go any further, I need to bring up a very noteworthy point about The Haunting of Bly Manor. This is the introduction of Rahul Kohli to the Flaniverse. In addition to being devastatingly talented and a distractingly beautiful man, Rahul Kohli is also incredibly funny and just a giant nerd. I am so excited to see him alongside Mark Hamill in Flanagan's upcoming Fall of the House of Usher series, and it just warms my nerd heart to see a fellow Star Wars devotee get to work with one of their heroes. Now, Rahul made a particularly big splash on the internet after the release of Midnight Mass because of his character on that show, Sheriff Sexy with the Stash. And that's not his actual name. It's Sheriff Hassan. That's just my pet name for him. Now, while Sheriff Hassan is a phenomenal character, and yes, handcuff me, Mustache Daddy. That's gonna get clipped out, isn't it? Oh. God.
No, it's good.
Handcuff me, Mustache Daddy could also apply to Twilight. Why am I like this? Anyway. Whew. Sheriff Hassan is an incredible character, but Rahul Kohli's character in Bly Manor, Owen Sharma, for me is basically the perfect man. Owen is kind, sweet, loving, loyal. He's a chef. And he has just the most wonderful, groan-inducing puns. Like I said, the perfect man. One word that could best describe Owen is steadfast. His character, what he brings to the story and to the world of Bly itself, acts as a bulwark against the fog of forgetting that permeates the spirits and the people of the manor, as well as the sense of forgetting that comes with the nature of death and grieving. Now, Owen is very much a constant for the Wingrave children. Food, both in the preparation and eating of it, is often evocative of home. Home-cooked meals, home-style food, comfort food. Like, there's a reason we so often associate food with safety, home, and love. In this sense, being the chef is Owen's way of providing a stable, happy home for Miles and Flora, and for everyone in the manor. Most of the happiest, most comfortable, most familial moments happen in the kitchen of the manor with Owen. And Owen is so much more than just the hired cook. He is truly a part of the Bly family, and I would argue that he is very much the emotional core alongside Hannah. He has a genuine very much paternal bond with the children. He's protective of them and of the staff. He's really the only one that can genuinely disarm Hannah and make her laugh. And the entire household rallies around him when he needs them the most, banding together to cook his favorite meal when he is in the deepest throes of grief. Owen, in a way, is the protector of memory on the show. He carries the love and memory of Hannah with him his entire life. He stayed with her body as it was recovered from the well, cleaned it and prepared it for burial, has her picture at his restaurant, and has loved her the entire way. He is one of the only memories of Bly Manor that remain for Miles and Flora. They eventually forget the fear and the trauma of their childhood, and with that, most of the people that were present in their younger lives. They do, however, remember Owen. And Owen safeguards those memories, both the beautiful and the terrible. For them, it's better and healthier for them to forget certain aspects of their time at Bly. And Owen recognizes this, even if it saddens him that they no longer remember Hannah, the woman he loved and who protected them, even after her death, or Danny, who sacrificed herself by taking in the lady in the lake to save them. However, Owen is content to remember everything for them. And this is later imparted to Jamie, who tells the tale of Bly Manor as a story that will stay with the now grown Wingrave children, even if they don't remember it for themselves. Now, despite wanting to get the hell away from his rural hometown of Bly, Owen stays there to care for his mother, who is fading away due to dementia. After her death, Owen, Hannah, Danny, and Jamie sit and drink around a bonfire, talking about and toasting to those they had lost. Now, Owen upholds the true nature of his mother, not the sanitized, simplified version that people often discussed in hushed, reverent tones after the funeral, nor the shell of who she was after the disease robbed her of her memories and herself. He's honest about the turmoil and the weight that taking care of her hoisted onto his life, but keeps her true self alive in his own memory and alive in the memories of his closest friends, whether or not they actually knew her in person, while recognizing that while his mother will always be a part of him, eventually he will have to let her go. Owen's toast to his mother is one of the standout moments of the entire show, and I highly recommend you all watch it for yourself. It is absolutely incredible. But I'm going to read it for you now. I won't do it justice. I'm no Rahul Kohli. But because of my personal reasons for discussing Bly Manor today, it's important to me that this speech is part of this video. So Owen says, "My mom, Margaret Sharma, she was 67, except sometimes by the end she forgot that, called me by my dad's name or her brother's. You know, I tried to pretend that I didn't know who I was supposed to be. They didn't say any of that at the funeral. They wouldn't. They just smoothed it over, made it nice. So they left out all the bad stuff. And all the good stuff. They didn't say how funny she was. How she would wink at you across the breakfast table. She had a sweet tooth and a dirty laugh. And she loved me so hard it hurt. Sometimes, no matter what I did. She was gone long before she died. And I miss her. She was my anchor. And then, I suppose, she was my burden. Christ. She seemed so small at the end, but still so heavy. And all I could do was just let her hang on to me until it was time for her to go. And soon, I'll let her go too. There's a heartbreaking irony to a line Jamie has earlier about Owen's mother after the funeral. She says she'd be relieved to die if she were in that position. Losing yourself like that, being worn away a little bit every day. Good Christ, just shoot me. Put me out of my misery. It's not fair on anyone. And Jamie later has to watch Danny, the love of her life, slowly drift away due to the influence of the lady in the lake. Viola's angry spirit gradually takes a stronger hold over Danny, and Jamie wants to ignore the signs, pretend it's not happening yet, grasping for every little bit of time left. Finally, Danny has to return to Bly and become the new lady in the lake before she loses herself over completely. And in doing so, she saves Jamie and everyone else from the wrath of Viola. It's not fair, not to her, not to Jamie, but it's inevitable. The first time I watched The Haunting of Bly Manor, it didn't resonate with me in the same way that The Haunting of Hill House did. For one, the works of Henry James were never like a factor in my life in the way that Shirley Jackson was. And the relationship between the Crane siblings in Haunting of Hill House, their conflicts, their dealings with grief and loss were so relatable to me. And my own personal experiences, but Bly Manor has grown on me with every sequential rewatch. And over the past couple of years, and the past few weeks in particular, Bly Manor really has hit home. My grandmother has dementia, and her mind has been gradually going for several years. But it's taken a much more rapid turn over just this past year, and the decline has been even more steep, even just over this past month. And I was young when my mom passed away, and my grandparents took on the job of raising my older brother and me. Now, watching the woman who raised me, a woman who was fiercely loving and protective and smart and combatant and stubborn and complicated and infuriating and wonderful, lose almost everything that made her her. And what's almost worse in some ways is watching my grandfather, who is so strong and capable, have to deal with and witness his wife of over 60 years being reduced to just this shell of who she was. And some of her memories are still intact, and she's retained vestiges of her personality and sense of humor. But, she has to be cared for and looked after almost 24/7. And I think a lot of us were in some degree of denial over her condition until pretty recently. We wanted to believe that she could still manage, that the other shoe had yet to drop, that things could continue as they had been. Like Jamie, we were desperate for more time, for her to still be her for just a little while longer. And like Owen and like his mother, she's been our anchor for so long. And now she doesn't know what year it is most of the time. And her grasp on who we are is fleeting at best. And figuring everything out, her care, what steps to take, has been a burden. One we are bearing with love and with and for all of the love that she has put out throughout her entire life. But the weight's heavy all the same. The overriding terror and sadness of the haunting of Bly Manor is the dementia of the spirit. Unlike the ghosts of Hill House, who, even if corrupted by the house itself or by other spirits, they still retain most of, if not all of, who they were, like themselves. However, the spirits of Bly Manor forget themselves, who they were, what they loved, and as their memories fade, so too do their faces. The reason Peter Quint is so desperate to escape the confines of the Bly estate is because he has seen what happens to the spirit, and he is terrified of it. Understandably so. Peter resorts to manipulation and possession to try to escape that fate. Owen and Jamie, who also have no choice but to be resigned to it, not for themselves, but for ones that they love, they face it with grief and with fear, with very reluctant acknowledgement, but also with love. And as cruel as it is, as difficult as it is to bear, and as much as they wish that they had more time with their loved ones when they were whole, Owen and Jamie do everything in their power to do right by those who are fading away in front of them. And once they are gone, they tell their stories, and they keep their legacy and memories alive in the memories of others. They learn the secret that young Viola tells to Owen. Dead doesn't mean gone. And something Olivia Crane says in The Haunting of Hill House rings true here as well, not just for all the characters in Bly Manor, but for all of us. When we die, we turn into stories. And every time someone tells one of those stories, it's like we're still here for them. We're all stories in the end. And on that somber note, remember Mustache Daddy? Here's where I'm going to conclude tonight's very emotional video. I am Elise. Handcuff me, Mustache Daddy. And, as always, stay spooky.